Hello there. Welcome to Speaking of Business. I'm your host, Nancy Boyle. Welcome to our show today. We're going to be talking about that fun topic, the Affordable Care Act, and what it means to you as a business owner. So joining me today are, I'll go kind of left to right, Mark Patrick, CPA with Patrick and Robinson CPAs, Jeannie Helton, an attorney with Smith, Halsey, and Busey, and Bob McKenzie, owner of McKenzie HR, a human resource consulting firm. So welcome.
Thank you.
Okay. Mark, I'm going to start with you. Just tell us a little bit about what you do so we can give everybody a chance to say what it is we do, and then we'll put Jeannie on the hot seat.
Okay, thank you. I'm a practicing CPA. I've had my own firm a little over 30 years. We do just about any kind of accounting or tax consulting services you might need, other than SEC and large company work. So any questions you may have, we'd be glad to help.
Okay. Jeannie?
I'm Jeannie Helton. I'm a lawyer at Smith, Halsey, and Busey, and we are a full-service law firm, but my particular area is in the business department with a focus on healthcare regulatory compliance, working with hospitals and physicians and insurance plans.
Okay.
And I'm Bob McKenzie. I'm president of McKenzie HR. We've been in business for 13 years now. And primarily, we go to companies who want to outsource the human resource department. Usually they're small companies, and benefits is a big part of that. So glad to be here.
Okay. So, Jeannie, we're going to put you on the hot seat as the lawyer.
Yes.
Because there's, every day there's something else about the Affordable Care Act, and it's obviously impacting small businesses. I think some of them are under the delusion that they don't have enough employees, so it won't affect them at all, and that's what we're here. So why don't you lay the foundation for us and tell us what is this thing?
Well, I will start by telling you a little bit of how we got to where we are. I think it's helpful for business owners to understand a little bit about what precipitated the development of the Affordable Care Act and how it will then impact them.
Okay.
But essentially, healthcare, as we know, is a huge national expenditure. It is uniquely one of those things that touches individuals as well as businesses. And employers that have healthy employees have productive businesses. Everyone who is an employer recognizes that when an employee is out or ill, and that can be a physical illness or a mental illness, it costs them money.
Sure.
And so it's important that we focus on health. And unfortunately, in the United States, although we have a huge amount of money that's spent on health care, we still had in 2010 50 million uninsured or underinsured Americans. That's a huge number of people. And really what the problem becomes is that there are federal laws that require healthcare providers, hospitals principally, to take care of individuals who have an emergency medical condition. And so whether you have insurance or not, if you're in a car accident and you have an emergency medical condition, you're going to go to the hospital and you're going to get the care that you need. And for humanitarian reasons, many times you're going to get care anyway, even if it's not a life or death today issue.
Sure.
And somebody has to pay for that. And so hospitals and healthcare providers are no different than printing companies and landscaping companies. They have to pay bills. And so what happens is that there's this dirty concept called cost shifting that comes into play. And we all know that it happens in a lot of different areas, but it does happen in healthcare. And when an individual comes into the hospital and has a surgery and checks out after 5 days and has a $50,000 hospital bill, they can't pay it. And so somebody ends up paying that, and the hospitals then have to shift the cost of that to the insured and to the businesses that buy the insurance. And so it really does affect business owners. It comes that way. So in 2010, the Affordable Care Act was implemented, and it essentially was designed to cover three main purposes. We wanted to increase the number of insureds that were out there and the types of insurance that they had. If they were underinsured, we wanted to level the playing field, so to speak. We wanted to cause healthcare providers to become more focused on the delivery of health care so that they could consistently provide better care at a lower price. And then, so those were really the principal goals for the Affordable Care Act. And it's a huge act, but we're going to focus on the employer concept today, that focus on what the employer mandate is.
Okay.
And there's a shared responsibility. And first of all, for people watching, if you are an employer right now and you have less than 49 full-time employees, then the employer mandate provisions of the Affordable Care Act do not apply to you today. I will say the Affordable Care Act has been changing since 2010. It's changed quite a bit this week, which I think Mark and Bob are going to talk about. But it does change quite a bit. But for right now, if you're a business and you have less than 49 employees, then you are going to be exempt from the employer penalty. If you are an employer that you have between 50 and 100 employees, you're defined as a applicable large employer. And what that means is that for your full-time employees, you either have to purchase for your employees an affordable health care plan that meets minimum criteria, or you can pay a penalty. And you have to determine which one as a business is best for you. And there are economic considerations and tax considerations that go into that. And there's human resources and human relationship issues that come into play as well. But essentially, let me just say that in terms of the affordability factor, because you do have to first meet the affordability factor. If you're a small business and you decide, I want to offer insurance to my employees, you can't just pick any plan. The plan has to be affordable to that employee. And what does that mean? That means that they have to, the cost of that plan cannot exceed 9.5% of that employee's. It initially said household income, and I think now there's a safe harbor that speaks to the employee's W-2 wages. But if it costs the employee more than 9.5% of their wages, then the plan is not affordable and it will not qualify to exempt the employer from paying the penalty. The plan has to cover 60% or more of the cost of the services. So you can't just purchase a plan that's, okay, if you go in the emergency room, 10% will be covered. It has to be a 60% or more. And in the insurance world, those are considered bronze plans. Then 70% is a silver plan, I think 80% is gold, and 90% is a platinum plan. And so the plan has to be affordable. It has to cover a certain percentage, the 60% minimum, but then it also has to offer a number of essential requirements. And insurance brokers are the best people to talk to about that, but it is everything from mental health to baby deliveries, emergency room care, inpatient hospital, outpatient hospital, prescription drug benefits, pediatric benefits, and well care, preventative services, vaccines, and preventative health care, which I think is a really important thing for employers. So if you are an applicable large employer and you want to cover your employees and you purchase a plan that is meets all of those criteria for your employee, then you will not be subject to a penalty. If you are an employer and you choose not to offer the plan, and you also have to offer it to substantially all of your workforce, which I think has been defined to be 95% of the workforce.
So you can't just pick the healthy ones.
No, that's
Okay.
right. It has to be 95% of your full-time workers. And so essentially, if you offer the plan to them and it meets all of those criteria, you won't pay a penalty. But as a business owner, you might look at that and decide after getting the quotes that it's more than you can really feel comfortable paying. And that's when you have to look at the penalty. And the penalty is a little bit complicated, depends on your particular factors. But essentially, if you don't offer any insurance and you have an employee who takes advantage of a tax credit, That's in order to get socked with the penalty. The employer has to have an employee that takes advantage of a tax credit, which I think Mark's going to talk more about. But if the employer chooses not to pay the insurance, then they have to pay $2,000 for every employee that they have. Now, the initial calculation is if you subtract 30 from the number of your full-time employees. So if you have 100 full-time employees, you subtract 30 and multiply that times 2,000. So you'd have 70 times 2,000. So you'd have a $140,000 penalty. If you offer some insurance, but it's not adequate insurance, then the penalty can be up to $3,000 per employee, but there is a cap on the total amount so that employers are not penalized for offering some insurance more than they would if they didn't offer any. That wouldn't make sense.
Okay.
So that's essentially what the law is. It's a lot.
Okay.
But hopefully that was helpful.
That was helpful. Now let's get to the money man over here. So
Yeah.
substantial money that we're talking about. So what are the tax implications? What are the financial ramifications, if you will, in this situation?
Fundamentally, you've got three different penalties. One, you've got the $3,000 per employee penalty for having an unaffordable plan, $2,000 penalty for not having an adequate plan overall, depending on your size of employment. And the third, there is a relatively new pronouncement come out, $100 penalty for having a non-qualified plan. And that's the one that particularly impacts a small business. We have been phasing this in. It's hard to believe it's been almost 5 years since this thing passed. It's become part of our DNA, but we are having to deal with the reality of applying the law now. So the beginning of 2014 was the first year that employers really had to start offering some of the mandated coverage. So that included things like not having a lifetime cap. We used to have $1 million, $2 million lifetime cap, and these other criteria that Jeannie talked about. So those plans had to start implementing those things. So beginning in 14, individuals started having to have some kind of a qualified plan, whether with the employer or individually. So many have gone to the individual exchange because that's the only option they had. Small employers initially were defined as under 50. So we thought full-time equivalent under 50 be 40 hours. No, the definition is essentially 30 hours per week. So that's why you find so many businesses doing a 29-hour full-time employee to keep under that threshold. And that's pending before Congress to maybe raise that. We'll see if that happens. If you are a mid-size employer, you get an extra year for that implementation to come in, and that's between 50 and 100 or under 100. So they have an extra year to comply. So 2015 is the first year, with the one-year extension now. 2015 is the first year the employers are mandated to comply with this law. So under 50, the small employer is exempt.
At this point?
At this point.
Okay.
For 2016, then those between 50 and 100 have to kick in and provide that. All those over 100 are now required to provide that coverage. So you have to meet the criteria of less than 9.5% of the employee's income, W-2 income. And the reason that became practical is how do you define household income when you may have a disjointed household? So they kind of had to step back, you had to do something that's quantifiable. So the $3,000 penalty only kicks in if one of your employees goes to the exchange and buys insurance because they can't get it or choose not to get it because it's unaffordable or doesn't qualify. And then you have to go through this rather complicated calculation of whether that applies or not. The same thing is true with the $2,000 penalty for not providing the insurance, and that's where you get this break-even decision of if the employer should provide it or not. So the $2,000 penalty actually has an 80 employee exemption for this year, and then it's a 30 employee exemption next year. So you don't have to have 100% coverage, but if anybody goes out and goes to the exchange, you start going through this test and have to supply the information. The subsidy comes through the exchange, and that is in the form of a tax credit, but you can have the credit in advance as a reduction of the premium. So the IRS is essentially paying the insurance for you. And then at the end of the year, this being the first tax year, 2014 tax returns, to do that reconciliation. And that reconciliation comes from a Form 1095-A that is provided by the exchange. And recently, you've heard in the news that that form had a lot of mistakes. Something like 20% of the forms were in error. The challenge is nobody knows who got the errant forms, so we have to wait on everybody until that all gets worked out. So that's a challenge on the individual side. But to pay for the subsidy the IRS is giving, they want the employers to pay the penalty to help offset the cost of the government of doing that. So that's the two
Boy,
big
do you
penalties.
need to get with your accountant right now.
I'm just going to say, I'm glad we have the accountants to
Yeah,
be able to
exactly.
figure all
Very
this stuff
glad.
out. This
Sure.
is amazing.
The third penalty, which is probably causing the most heartburn to the small business, many small businesses took a shortcut route and either provided a medical reimbursement plan of some sort, and that's not a flexible reimbursement account like a flexible spending account many employers have, and it's not a health savings account, which is something else that many people have. Those are still in the game with some modifications. But the big one is where you bring me your premium and I'll write you a check to pay for your premium that you got individually. We took that as a pre-tax deduction, essentially through a cafeteria plan. And nobody questioned whether the coverage was any good or not. You got insurance, I'm paying you, everybody's happy. It's pre-tax benefit. Some others went even more aggressively and said, we'll pay all of your co-pays, your deductibles, your vision, anything that's not insured, we'll pay that in addition to that with either dollar cap, percentage cap. Again, that could all be done on a pre-tax basis. Well, those are no longer minimum essential coverage plans. So even though you're a small employer, under 50, you still will have to bring all of your insurance plans into some level of compliance in order to have that as a qualified plan. So it's a modest penalty of $100 per day per person, per employee,
That can cha-ching, cha-ching.
$36,500 per employee per year. So
That's a
all the
lot.
small businesses
Huge.
started to panic because this was effective the beginning of 14. Like, who knew? Nobody told me this.
Yeah.
So just recently, in the middle of February, where we are taping this, they said, we'll waive that penalty until the end of June 2015 because nobody was ready, nobody was prepared, including the IRS, to enforce it. So beginning July 1st, we'll have to start looking at whether these plans qualify or not. But that's changing the landscape of the small employer immensely. You will still be able to have S corporation health care reimbursement for the shareholders over 2%, and that's undetermined because this notice that came out said that the employers that have this kind of plan will not have to make any changes until the IRS provides some explanation of what those rules will be. But it still has to be somewhat non-discriminatory in these plans with whatever you're doing. So coming attractions, every day we read the paper and says, okay, what's new, what do we have to do?
Yes, yes, it's so critical to have your advisors. So not to leave you out, Bob, because
Thank you.
Because I think you think about you've got a small business, and small businesses are competing with large businesses for quality employees,
Just like everybody else.
just like everybody else. And so, from the employee
What do we do?
perspective, the employer perspective, especially with the smaller businesses, what do we do?
Punt.
Call Bob.
Punt.
Okay, I'm sorry now. But I think that, first of all, small businesses, for the most part, have been offering medical insurance to their employees, okay, regardless of size. So I've even seen, companies as small as 6 employees offering medical insurance of some sort to their employees. And they see that as an essential recruitment and retention device. And I think that we'll continue to do that. In fact, I think there's some opportunity for some of the small business to actually get something that could be a little bit more affordable. When I say small businesses, I'm talking about the ones under 50.
Right.
Okay? How do we want to structure the insurance? I've always been a big fan of HSAs, and they're still in the mix.
Okay.
I think that they have like high deductibles, but they it can be a little bit more flexible from an employer standpoint as to what to contribute towards that. There's also the PPO plans with a number of different plans available as far as the number of deductible co-pays and that type of thing. You were talking about the wellness. I mean, every plan under this new system, and actually it's been that way in Florida for some time, has to have an annual physical, okay, deductibles waived, Okay, annual OBGYN visit, deductible is waived. The vaccines or the well baby care, the deductible is waived. So the thing is that there are a number of wellness parts of these plans to make sure that you can go in and you can get yourself checked up, get your blood work done, colonoscopy every 10 years at this point, so to make once you reach 50. So the thing is that all of this is covered. Now the next thing we have to kind of think about, I think you mentioned that too, was mental health. Now there used to be some carve-outs for the mental health, or there was some limits. Now it's just kind of rolled into the overall plan. Mark was saying that there was no lifetime limits. There used to be limits. That's gone away. So that has actually, by putting some of these in, it actually raises the cost, the overall cost of the premium. However, the idea, and I've seen this years and years ago with some of our clients when
Sure.
the insurance rates were going up 30% a year, and I saw these poor business owners sitting there almost crying, trying to figure out, how do I afford this to my employees? And they had to do a different type of cost shifting, okay? In other words, they had to push more back onto the employee, and the more they did that, the more the younger, healthy people said, no, I'm not going to take this anymore. I can't afford this. So what happens is the healthy people opt out. They're not going to have the premiums for these healthy people who have very little claims.
Right.
And so what happens is the people who need the insurance are the ones, well, I have no choice, I got to pay this.
Right.
And so the group is now tainted already by the people who need the insurance, and the premium is not big enough to cover all the claims, so then the insurance rates go back up again. So now we have this new plan, and yes, we do have to have some minimal coverage that's available, but when you do put in some of the younger people in there, I think over the long term it we'll see. I mean, something had to be done. I just know that something had to be done.
Well, and
Whether
it
or not
seems
this
like
is the
they're
right thing,
Yeah.
this is another,
It seems like they're
question.
trying to shift into more early detection of things. If your wellness stuff is covered and almost required for you
Right.
to go once a year, then we can find something early on. It's a whole lot less expensive in the grand scheme of things than if you wait till
If
the
you
nth
wait
degree.
till you're sick.
Right.
Yeah.
Or when you already have that, when you're already diagnosed as diabetic, you could get some of that done beforehand, and or if you have cancer and it's already at stage 4 or something, that is obviously problematic. But if you knew you had something, you could have done something. It would have been cheaper in the long run. You're absolutely right. So that's another thing that part of the wellness portion of the Affordable Care Act. If people take advantage of it, it's a good thing.
Now, I've heard the term SHOP plan. What's that?
Small Business Health Options Plan,
Okay. And so what does that mean?
Healthcare Option Plan. What does that mean? That means that employers that have less than 50 employees, okay, can get group insurance through the exchange.
Okay.
So one of the things that they are kind of, should be taking a look at is, well, they should be taking a look at a couple of things. Number one, we've got to kind of figure out that 9.5% of annual earnings. If it goes above that, then it's not a qualified plan.
It's not affordable anymore.
It's not affordable plan, and you're subject to additional taxes and fines or whatever they call them. And God, usually
Shared responsibility payment.
share responsibility payment. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah.
It's like, this is
Doesn't
like
sound quite so bad when you put it that way.
shared responsibility payment. So the thing is that you can take a look at that and see if that is something worth your while. Number of different plans. Like I said, I started talking about an HSA, which is a high deductible. You reach
That's a health savings account.
health savings account
For
right,
folks who aren't
exactly,
familiar with the
thank you.
term.
And all of the money that goes into the health savings account is pre-tax. And it's not taxable to employees. Employees can put money in. The employer can put money into the individual accounts as well. Then you have the PPO plans, which have different levels of deductibles and copays. It could be anything as low as $5 per visit or $30 per visit or more. You can have a POS, HMO plan, okay? A POS is a point of service plan. HMO is a health maintenance organization. So there's a number of different things, and too much to explain here.
Okay.
But talk to your broker, understand what they are and what makes the most sense for you and your demographics. How much you contribute. You're going to have to contribute at least 50% of the premium for the single coverage. So we know that. You might have to do more to make it affordable.
Right.
Okay? Because at 9.5%, at basically $300 a month comes out to about $34,000 a year. So we've got to be careful as to how to make sure that you don't exceed that 9.5% for any of your employees.
And you were saying earlier when we were talking that there are things an employer can do where employees, a lot of employees just don't understand
Yeah.
the cost of insurance to the employer. And you were talking about some things an employer might do to share with the employees exactly how much they're spending so that there's a recognition.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm a big believer in utilizing what they call the hidden paycheck or whatever. I mean, that's the whole thing, is that there's a lot of money that businesses have to pay in addition to the salary or the hourly rate that they're paying
What
their
shows
employees.
up in your bank account, yeah.
Right.
Well, yeah, what shows up in your bank account, like they've got to match everything for FICA, okay? So there's 7.65% of probably 99% of the employees that they got to meet. They got to match. There's workers' compensation insurance, and it varies depending on the type of jobs that the employees in your organization have. Obviously, you got to pay unemployment, okay? And the employer is solely responsible for paying that. Now, those things are required, okay? After that, if we pay medical insurance, paid time off if you're allowed to, pay vacation, sick time, those kinds of things. So take a look at everything, that is part of your benefit program, and let's kind of take a look at that and give that to the employees. Typically, you're going to see it's at least 25% of more. So if somebody's making $20,000 a year, it's going to be more than that for somebody making $25,000 a year. It's probably going to be like or $20,000. That's going to be more like 30% or 40% of their earnings.
Well, and that's it, because when you get your paycheck, this is the amount of money I can spend on my bills
Right.
and to have fun.
Right.
And you don't see that whole other 20, 25, 30% that is being paid on your behalf.
Right.
And it's
And-
like, it's not in my bank account,
Not
it
in my
doesn't
bank
count.
account, it doesn't seem out of sight, out of mind kind of thing, yeah.
And an employer who is able to purchase a plan and it meets the affordability, it covers 60%. There are a lot of employees that when they go to the doctor and they have to pay 40% of that cost because that's the plan their employer could afford, that they are stunned when they get the bill, and they just feel very frustrated and feel
Sure.
like that. But I think if the employer makes the employee aware, this is how much our premiums cost, this is how much we're spending, maybe they're a little less likely to want to jump ship and find greener grass on the other side. Sometimes it's not green.
And one of the big things I think the employers have to look at too, I really take a look at really three things, main things, okay. But one of them is the maximum out-of-pocket expense, okay, per year. It can only go up and top out at, I think it's like $6,000 or $7,000 a year, okay. I'm not 100% sure of that, but the fact of the matter is that it has to top out. Some do a little bit less than that. So what's affordable to your employees, and how can we work it in so that we can make sure that once they reach that, then the medical costs are covered at 100%.
Guys, I'm sorry, but we are out of time.
Okay.
So I want to thank you both for being here. Thank you in the audience for joining us. I hope you learned a lot. You can certainly direct your questions to us at the Small Business Development Center, and we'll ferret it out to our professionals here. And go see your accountant,
And
your
your broker.
lawyer, and your HR consultant to make sure you are in compliance with the law, because, as you mentioned, Mark, the penalties can be very stiff. So we want everybody out there doing what they need to do to get the best employees that's affordable for them. And so hopefully this has been helpful. So thank you again for being here.
Thank you
And
for
thank you
having
in the
us.
audience for joining us. And Come back next time when we'll be speaking of business. Bye-bye now.
You can find me through WorkSource if you're interested in getting, yes, I absolutely do. I mean, I'm really taking this, speaking extremely serious. You have no idea how serious I am. I'm investing my money in it big time. Oh my gosh. Well, if you've got a card, let me just. I will. I will give you my card. I would love to meet her. I'm going to. She's just wide open to here. Oh, I just.
She's uncouth.